G'day and welcome to the Investor Motivation Podcast. G'day, Amy, again.
Hello, Rob.
Haven't we been busy when it comes to
Oh,
podcasts?
you've been more busy than me, but yeah, we
Chatting,
have.
chatting to everyone.
Good.
So,
Hopefully, people are learning a lot.
yeah, chatting to you next time.
Yes, you are chatting to me, yes.
Cool. What are we chatting about at our next chat?
I
Chat,
think,
chat.
which will be in a couple of days, we're going to cover off on finances for families.
Yep.
Yeah, young people starting out, getting their financial houses in order.
All right. So this is right down your area, and because you're in the midst of doing all this.
Yeah, but I'm
Yep.
excited, obviously, to have you there, and you've lived it and done it, so that'll be really good. And you've had
Yep.
more experience in the industry as well, so
Yep.
you've helped a lot of people do it.
Not quite dead yet, just
No,
saying. But
not at all.
but yes, starting out, definitely done all that. Raised four kids and house and business and all the above. So I
Tick, tick,
might
tick.
I might better chip in a bit as we go along.
Perfect.
Cool. Now today we're chatting to Kerry Schultz from Green Taylor Partners, and the way that this one came about is that Kerry and I had an awesome chat with our mutual client about the issue of larger self-managed super funds, now that pensions have gone back to the normal minimums, we haven't got the 50% discount, cash flow is a bit of a nightmare,
Yeah.
particularly for some of our farmers with the farming land that's gone up.
Yeah, that obviously takes up a large balance of the fund itself, so to have the liquidity is tough.
Yep. So it was such a really good chat that I had with Kerry, and yeah, for those people that are struggling with cash flow from their super funds, particularly self-managed super funds, where there's often unique, lumpy assets, this one is absolutely well worth a listen.
Yeah,
But before we kick off, Amy, you're going to help me with the acknowledgement of land.
perfect. On behalf of the Investor Motivation podcast, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we record this podcast and pay respect to our elders past, present, and emerging.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy, and not even reading it. Very good. Thank you very much, Amy. We will catch you on the next one. Yeah, thanks
Yeah.
everyone for listening and enjoy the podcast.
Enjoy.
G'day, Kerry Schultz from Green Taylor Partners. Welcome to the Investor Motivation Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Very good. Now, we've worked together on quite a few mutual clients over the years, and we had a pretty awesome discussion a couple of weeks ago with our mutual clients.
Yeah, we definitely did.
Yep, you hit the whiteboard and smashed it. So the problem that we're looking at, which a lot is happening in the superannuation world, and we're seeing it here with a lot of self-managed super funds and farming land, where over the last 25 years we've been putting in land into superannuation funds, and we've been creating these lovely deductible leases, which have been awesome, saving a lot of tax over many years. But as the farming land prices have been amazing, it's making it really hard to fund the pensions, particularly now that the minimums have gone up.
It definitely is.
Yeah, so that was the chat that we had, and we're talking about funds that are getting to 4 mil across a husband and wife up to, well, can be close to 10 mil. You've probably got more than that, but it's about funding these pensions. And yeah, and I suppose if we just leap into the first question around valuations, this is where a lot of auditors are wanting valuations more often. So previously we've been trying to time our valuations so you don't have to pay out that much. A lot of these farmers don't need the income. What's your take on the valuations, Kerry?
Yeah, well, our auditors that we use are still on the 3-year cycle. And that seems to be working pretty well as long as you're aware of when those due dates are. And we try and also time the lease valuations with those market valuations as well. So I think the 3 years, I think, works pretty well, allows you enough time to get plans in place and allow for that increase that's coming up. I know some auditors are requiring a bit more regularly, and every auditor is different. Interpretation of the laws are different. Um, but probably one of the things there is from August, I think it was, the valuations now require comparative sales in the valuation. So that's been a little bit of a new thing to have to come about. So a lot of our audits have been held up because of that small comparative missing, but it's an easy fix, so it's absolutely fine.
Seems to be the common theme that I've seen across all auditors, that they want the comparative sales. And yeah, then there's been a lot of variances since. But And this goes for all self-managed or superannuation funds, and not just funds that have land in them. There's a lot of bigger funds that have these liquidity cash flow problems. But if we just take back a step, can you explain how pension payments and the minimums? Can you explain how they're calculated?
Okay, so for an annual pension minimum, what happens is the value of the member's benefit that's in pension phase is taken at the 30th of June the year before. And then from that, according to the actual member's age, is what the actual minimum is that's required. So, you range from 4% if you're, 55 to 64, right up to 7% if you're over 95 years of age. So all of that pins on the valuation at 30 June 2022,
And of course, over
the year that we're in, obviously.
the last 4 financial years since COVID kicked in, we've had the 50% discount,
Yeah.
which has been really helpful. But at budget night, the fact that we heard nothing means that we go back to normal.
We do. And unfortunately, this is a big cash flow burden on a lot of these funds, especially if the principal asset is that farmland, because it's becoming such a significant amount of these funds, which is what our discussion today about is liquidity and getting those pensions out.
Yep. And
Always around that, sorry.
yeah, that's right. And that's where, our chat in your office with our mutual client was, yeah, a really good eye opener. And I suppose that's where I was learning around, T-bars, and you'll need to explain T-bars and the what is it, the debit, you get a debit when you roll pension back to accumulation.
Yep.
So can we have a breakdown of T-bars to start with, just to see
Oh,
see,
look
see
out.
how much we can bore people?
Okay, so your T-bar is, I explain it, so it's the value that you can start pensions with in your lifetime, okay? So it's not the value of what your pension is every year as it goes up or down with market values. It's when you purchase it as such. So it's the value when you start. When the T-bars first came in, we had 1.6, and now it's gone up to 1.7 with indexation. But what does happen is, let's say someone has used their entire 1.6, I'm going to use. We started pension, say, 2 years ago with the 1.6. Now, let's say the value of their pensions has gone up to, 3 mil.
Yep.
And if we don't actually, for some reason, we want to convert that back to accumulation, what actually happens? So let's say this entire fund wanted to go from pension right back to accumulation. What actually happens is the commutation, we call it, so they're coming out of pension into accumulation, actually comes back through and goes against that T-bar, and it'll actually reset that T-bar so that person can actually start pensions with $3 million again in their lifetime. So it actually, you get your credit of 1.6, but then when you do a commutation back, you actually get that whole value to go back. So you never, you don't lose your T-bar. Let me just say that.
Yeah, and that was probably because I'm not a tax
This works better
accountant.
on a whiteboard. Sorry, Rob.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can say Kerry can smash a whiteboard out of the park, um, and nothing rude at all on it, which is even more impressive. The T bar and that debit that it created, where a pension's grown from 1.6 to 3 mil, you roll back 100% accumulation. At some stage in the future, if you want to transfer assets out of the fund, and or sell an asset, and you've got a capital gains tax issue, you can roll back.
Yep, you can go back into pension.
Yeah, and that can, obviously, the timing of this, Kerry, would need to be pretty ideal, pretty spot on in terms of the paperwork and the minutes around
Exactly
that.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's when you do go into, if it's a strategic plan to sell assets or go back into pension phase, you do just need to do a bit of a bit of planning around it, because you need to have your paperwork, in to start the pension at the time. You need to make sure your minimum pension is taken as well, and then obviously then the disposal of the assets. So there's lots of things that need to be coordinated, and that's where you just want to get all your professions in the loop. So like the other day we sat together, you and I, Rob, and then your solicitor, if you need a solicitor as well. You just need everyone to work together to make sure it works. And we're lucky enough in the area that we're in is everyone knows each other, everyone's worked together. So it's a really good working relationship between your professionals.
And the upside to looking at, and this goes it goes against the grain of, we know whatever's in pension is completely tax free and a beautiful. We can't get a better tax rate than that. But with these bigger funds where cash flow is just such an issue that you're going to have to start selling down assets or sell farming land, that people quite often have got a very strong emotional attachment. Paying some tax and moving back to accumulation means you don't have to sell assets. You're not forced to to sell assets to provide the cash flow. But and this is where I thought it was very good lateral thinking, and it was a bit of a mind blow experience for me where you said, "Hey guys, you got 100 grand worth of taxable income coming through. How about roll the whole thing back to accumulation?" It's not where we got to with these clients. We rolled 70% back from pension back to accumulation, kept 30% there, which was enough to meet their income needs. But you said, hey, how about roll the whole lot back and we don't have to worry about pensions at all?
Yeah.
And it was the amount of tax I was paying on 5-6 mil was just not that much, was it?
No, it really wasn't. And it comes with planning, but it also just comes with meeting people's needs. One of the fundamental things with super funds is the whole fund doesn't have to be in pension phase. This is the thing. You can select that a portion of your super fund is in pension phase and some of it is in accumulation.
Yep.
And a really important thing to understand is if you've met a condition of release, you can still access your super. It doesn't have to be in pension phase. It can be in the form of lump sums and things like that. So it's just about re-educating people and making them understand the pros and cons of both ways. And the thing is too, is everyone's different. The result that you get for every single person is going to be different because every single person has different needs.
You mentioned condition of release. Do you just want to define that for us? And I can if you'd like me to.
I was going to say you may have to jump in here, Rob, because technically I think that's your area. But so conditions of release are, if you have met certain conditions, you've retired, you've met an age limit. Over 65 is the key. Over 65, you get full access to your super. So, but doesn't mean you have to access it. Just means that you have the ability to access it. You go ahead, and if you want to get a bit more detailed on that, Rob.
Well, you're right. 65 is obviously from an age point of view is the mark. You can continue working full time for the rest of your life, but at 65 you've got full access. But at age 60, people's preservation age is working up to 60. We're just seeing the 59s drop off at the moment. So 60 is essentially the mark for most people that will be listening, but you have to be retired from age 60 to access to super and have no intention of going back to work.
Yep. And just on the age 60, Rob, just because tax is my thing, at the age 60 and over, whatever you pull out, you don't pay tax on personally.
Yep, fantastic.
So 60 is a good one as well.
Yep, that's right. And that's at zero tax rate, which is probably the best one we can find. And I think it's worth chatting. A lot of the funds that the fund that we were working on, there was just so chock-a-block full of farming land. We're seeing farming land because of the valuations have gone from $2,000 to $8,000 per acre. They're making up 90% of the fund. The tax advantage, for it to be there is still important because a lot of these people are still earning income in their individual names as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of clients are still farming or still involved in family farms, or they've got investments outside of, the super fund as well. So they do still have personal incomes that we have to balance up.
Yeah. And is there a limit? What stage do people, say, over pension age, a senior Australian get? When do we start to need to worry about how much tax in individual names?
Yeah. So obviously there's different offsets and everything like that, but a senior it's about $30,000 a year as a single senior, where you end up having to pay tax in an individual name. So that's about the mark that we start looking at and really identifying which way you're better off to go to invest. Have the income in your personal name, in your personal tax return, or have the income and the tax in the super fund.
So, and this is looking a bit further out at the new $3 million cap that they're looking at. And I'm chatting with my brother at lunchtime, and he's a financial advisor as well, as you know, that, they're talking about that, the 30% tax on the earnings and unrealised gains above the 3
Mm.
mil is a bit of a game changer, and we were wondering whether that's trying to force people out on the yeah, and how complex that'll make your job as the tax accountant.
Yeah, there's still, there's still a lot of talk and still a lot of finalising to happen in the legislation in that area. Once it gets implemented and we all get used to it, it'll be okay. Like it'll be what we have to do as such. But the 30%, which it's only on what's over the 3 mil. So you just got to manage your levels of investments in there. But
Yep.
the other thing is it's still sometimes advantageous to have it in there because an individual doesn't pay tax at more than 30 cents in the dollar until they earn over $45,000 a year.
Yep. Okay.
So, it's still balancing those things up. And if someone is retired, $45,000 is a lot of money to have invested to make that kind of return as well.
Yep. Yep. No, I couldn't agree more.
So it's
In
just a
terms,
balancing act.
yeah. Now, obviously, we're dealing, and the case study that we had was a couple. Someone's going to pass away down the track, and you've got, say, a $6 million fund, $3 million each, all sitting in accumulation. What are options there when someone does pass away, and you've got a $3 million in superannuation death benefit? What are the options for the surviving spouse?
Yeah. So there's a few different options. And obviously, it comes down to the legislation, what you can do with death benefits. And I'll just go back to every member's different. If you've got a defined, binding death benefit nomination, you've got to take that into account, all of those things. But what you can essentially do, though, is in a lot of cases, if the fund is 100% pension phase, the surviving member can actually commute, they may have the option to commute their pension back to accumulation.
Yep.
And then with the deceased member's benefit, they could then convert that into a pension using the gap that's now been created in their T-bar. So a lot of these situations, you can still keep majority of the assets and the cash within the fund.
Yep. Which is
So
particularly important where
yeah,
they're getting money outside in their own names
yes.
already. Yep.
Yeah, so it's just a bit of management, but you do have time to clean it up too, though. Like the ATO doesn't say, the day that person dies, it has to be dealt with. It's within 6 months or soon as practicable. So you can plan for it, and we can work on it.
Just for my knowledge, what's the process that you do as the accountant doing the tax return? The minutes to sort of direct and have a paper trail of what you've physically done.
Yeah. So it all comes back to like the members' nominations. Excuse me. A lot of the deeds within the super funds actually have all the prescribed paperwork in there.
Yeah.
And, we have that on record, and often you will hold a copy of a lot of these documents as well. So we just sit down and we discuss it. And it depends, like if the deceased member has said, I want it to go to my spouse, they get the option of it being a pension or withdrawing it, then we sit down and we ask the surviving member what they want to do. And like I said earlier, a lot of people have different requirements. A lot of people just like, no, I just want to pull it out of super and give it to the kids because I don't need that much. But then there's others that want to keep it all in there. So then we strategize and we move things around from, accumulation to pension, and we calculate that. Generally, at the end of a financial year is perfect because that's when all the valuations come in. That's when the tax return is done. But it can, like with all the software we have these days, you can do up-to-date figures, within a very reasonable amount any time of the year.
Yep, fantastic. Hey, Kerry, just a quick 1 minute summary and circling back to the problem, I suppose, the scenario where we've got large funds, farming land or not, just large funds that are now having trouble providing the liquidity and cash flow to pay what is the normal minimums without the 50% discount.
Yeah.
What's your advice to people in that space in terms of what should they be thinking about?
Um, Good question. You didn't. Yeah. My advice here is to have a think about it. Don't do anything knee-jerk reaction. You want to
Yep.
sit down. You really want to have a look at your future needs and what you want to do. Like I said, everyone's different. Quite often, if the surviving spouse, isn't financially, minded, then quite often it is, let's just wind up the fund,
Yep.
let's move the assets out to, especially farming land, move them on to the next generation. We've got to lots of funds that we're dealing with at the moment, some are drawing the farmland out, some are leaving it in there and converting back to accumulation, and some are just let's wait and see for the next few years until we're ready to make a decision. Because a lot of these people have, lived very frugally for a very long time, and all these assets they've built up, it's a very hard thing to, just hand them over. So it's a really tough decision to make. And honestly, it can take, 6 months, 12 months, or 2 years for someone to actually be comfortable with the decision they're about to make. And that's important that people are comfortable.
Yeah, it's a strange scenario that we've seen in our farming community where it was often the wives that worked off farm at the accountant's office at the schools and the
Yeah,
hospitals that kept these farms going for decades, because
absolutely.
things were often just so tough, and now they're faced with these problems that there's so many millions of dollars on the balance sheet now. Things have
Yeah.
changed. Mm.
It's still the same thing they've always had, though, is, especially farmers, they're so asset rich, but the cash flow is often not there. And we're even seeing that in this scenario because the lease on these farmlands aren't where they need to be to satisfy the minimum pension requirement. So even in retirement, the farmers have still got the cash flow issue. The poor things.
Yeah, poor things. Yeah, but yeah, even that's if they've got to take out 5, 6, or 7%, the leases are a mile off that in terms of percentage terms because the valuations of through low interest rates and all these other reasons have gone through the roof.
Yeah, and some of the returns on the leases I think are like 1.5% or something like that. So there's a lot of other things that we're going to have to liquidate to meet these minimum pensions if
Yeah.
that's the way it goes.
Yes. Yep. And or you look at all your other options, but in short, Gary, you're saying have a chat to your accountant, to your financial
Yep,
planner, get them
absolutely.
working together and quite often I found that every time I have a joint meeting with my clients and with their accountant, they walk out with every question answered.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. Like to have the meeting in the same room with everyone there, no one's repeating themselves or no one's misunderstood the conversation. The relay of the conversation. So it's a really, really valuable thing to have everyone together in a working relationship, and things get done more efficiently. You probably get a better outcome because I'm not trained the way you are, Rob. So the way you think is very different to how I think. So you just get a really good outcome and a great strategy going forward.
Yep. I've never met a client that hasn't appreciated their professionals coming together. And so, very good. Thank you for your time, Kerry. Really valuable. There's a lot of people thinking about this issue at the moment that are winding up funds that are, what do I do? Where does the cash come from? But the ultimate advice here is one that is general advice.
Very general.
Yeah, very general, is chat to your professional, to your advisor, to your accountant, seek advice. Thanks very much, Kerry.